Over at the Book Riot Network, they have a new podcast called Adaptation Nation, where they examine some literary works and their subsequent movie and TV adaptations. I mean, there's no shortage of source material. It feels like there's a new adaptation every week. They most recently tackled the genre-defying thriller, as well as the Cool Gold Manifesto, Gone Girl, with subsequent movie from David Fincher. They've also done just Joel Cohen's take on the Great Scottish Play, not to mention Denis Villeneuve and tackling the arguably unfilmable sci-fi classic Dune. The crew over at Adaptation Nation are way smarter than I am, more erudite, more incisive in their commentary. They can really pull at some of those literary motifs evident in like Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient. So a little bit more highbrow, which means they're probably less likely to tackle something like Amazon Prime's recent adaptation of Lee Child's long-running Jack Reacher series. Wasn't exactly planning on comparing the series to the source material, but after hearing about this mythos around the Jack Reacher character and really just enjoying the series that much, I thought I really did have to check out a book at last. And maybe I'm just having this sort of 90s nostalgic summer tentpole actioner flashback type of feeling lately. I mean, this idea of big muscle-bound men righting wrongs, saving the world. It was the glory days of Schwarzenegger and Stallone. And I have to admit, I am gleefully and unironically enjoying Peacemaker over at HBO. It's just big, dumb fun, and granted, the series tends to wear its welcome a little bit as the series progresses, but honestly, the first 3 episodes, I think I laughed out loud several times an episode. And John Cena is giving it 110% as the titular Peacemaker. James Gunn once again gets to go through his CD collection and create a musical mixtape to accompany his TV series. Anyway, I'm really enjoying it. Now over at Amazon Prime, they've released a little bit more serious, but no less fun, Reacher. It's essentially the equivalent of Harlequin romance movie, except for middle-aged dad bros. I mean, with Harlequin, you have the perky and successful big city lawyer returning to the country after she inherits the family orchard, where she butt heads with a hunky farmhand who's never left town and still lives in the home that he was born and raised in. With this, you get sort of the stoic, grim-faced loner that hardly speaks, that drifts into town, that uncovers some mass conspiracy or some wrongs that need to be righted, whatever it takes. And in both cases, you know exactly how the story's going to end. There's no mystery there. I mean, the enjoyment comes in how you get there and hitting those distinct beats. Reacher is punchy, gun-toting comfort food for bros. And while formulaic, it doesn't exactly mean that it's easy to pull off. Reacher gets it right. I mean, the fight choreography is good, the camera work clear and steady, nothing too flashy, nothing too shaky. And it doesn't get too self-reflexive or navel-gazing. It's not intent on examining the human condition. I mean, Reacher is just out for the bully, the smug, rich asshole who's hoarded everything for themselves and thinks that they can get away with it. And frankly, during this pandemic, there is just no shortage of smug, rich assholes out there. I mean, people who can spout misinformation with impunity, have infrastructure completely rebuilt to accommodate their monster yacht, to jack up life-saving pharmaceutical products to astronomical prices, or fly off into space while tweeting they could end world hunger, you know, if they felt like it. And so Reacher is pandemic therapy. I mean, the smug, rich asshole gets what's coming to them. There is a bit of vicarious pleasure that frankly doesn't bear too much scrutiny. Seriously, the A-Team can go to town blowing shit up and then drive around in a rather conspicuous black van. Same rule applies here. I mean, I get it, they're bad guys, but considering the massive body count, it is unlikely Reacher's just simply going to be able to leave town at the end of the series, and that's exactly what happens. And don't at me, it's not a spoiler. You know with a story like this that that is exactly what happens. The 8-episode series Reacher sticks very close to Lee Child's 1997 debut, where we are first introduced to the 6'5", 250-pound hulking monster of a man with hands like dinner plates, a fact that Childs never gets tired of reminding the reader of, which goes a long way in explaining the indignation Jack Reacher fans had for the casting of Tom Cruise, a leprechaun in lifts and better hair, as the titular Jack Reacher. And if you hadn't read the books, the movies are great. But in 2022, we finally get a closer approximation of the hulking hobo, not a vagrant, the muscle-bound Sherlock Holmes. Alan Ritchson is perfectly cast as the former military police officer that has been honorably discharged and is living his civilian life. He wanders into Margrave, Georgia, sits down at a diner, and is about to eat some peach pie before he's completely surrounded by police officers and hauled in on suspicion of murder. And let's not look too closely at the fact that this complete stranger to the town, hauled in on suspicion of murder, is essentially made part of the police force within 24 hours. Not only that, he's given a gun, and not just any gun, a Desert Eagle hand cannon. But, I mean, he does have kind eyes. Okay, the plotting here is the equivalent of the A-Team, except maybe with a bigger budget. You have the corrupt mayor, the businessman with the town in his back pocket and his crazy son, the crew of ethnic, naturally, assassins that are brought into town to dispatch with anyone that might get in their way. And it's not exactly big brain stuff going on here, but it's like good amount of action doled out at just the right pace. And I know this is sacrilege to say as a bookish person, but in this case, I found the series better than the book. I mean, a lot better than the book. The Killing Floor is really a tough slog, and maybe I did it no favors by reading it after watching the series, but frankly, I just don't understand what fans are so obsessed about. Lee Childs has written 26, 27 Jack Reacher novels since, and they're all bona fide sensations. They perform remarkably well. Lee Childs has reached that upper echelon of authors whose name appears in larger font than the title of the book. Fans are obsessed with the character. I don't understand why. I mean, here in this first book, Reacher is way too talkative, way too emotive. He's prone to singing out loud blues songs to himself. He administers several high fives during the course of the story, and he's way too pedantic. I mean, he is like an ADHD kid with a subscription to Men's Fitness, but instead of a fixation on dinosaur facts, he's out there helpfully explaining that, like, the forehead is the hardest bone in the body. It's essentially like concrete. And, I didn't quite understand it. And sure, Lee Childs has got lots of time to really develop the character, and maybe that's what happens, but here he hasn't even, solidified into a sweaty cliche like your Mac Bolton, your Rex Dalton, or your Rob Stone, these sort of grim loners drifting into town, looking to mete out their own brand of justice, and trouble around the corner and a woman in every port, which is another beef that I have with the book. Reacher is accused of murder, but he is in bed with one of the police officers by the end of the day. In the book, we are introduced to them meeting, and we see Reacher's keen analytical mind, his Sherlockian ability to take in every minute detail that surrounds him, thinking, boobs. At least on the show, Officer Roscoe Conklin is given some agency. She's the initiator. When people break into her house in the book, she is reduced to a quivering mess, crying into the shoulder of Jack Reacher, scared for her life. On the TV show, she's more pissed than anything and pretty well tells Reacher to shut his condescending trap when he asks if she's afraid. And there's just the right amount of violence throughout. The book tends to drag in spots, and you don't have to move too much around to make sure there's a good action beat in every episode of the show. I know it sounds like faint praise, but the episodes are shot very well. The action scenes are clear and non-fussy, and you're given just enough exposition to move the story along to its logical conclusion. It only looks easy. It's the difference between the straightforward and enjoyable The Mandalorian and the overly fussy and tending to drag Book of Boba Fett. Jack Reacher is perfect diversionary TV that doesn't require too much thinking. It's basically the Great British Bake Off with more testosterone. The book never really sucked me in, and I think a large part of that is Child's penchant for the short declarative sentences. There's not a lot of mix to them, just short descriptive bits of prose over and over from the beginning to the end, and it gets to you after a while because it's nothing but short sentences over and over again. And I found myself being pulled out of the story repeatedly from the clunky dialogue, the cliched relationships, the constant mansplaining, the hammy descriptions of them hooking up. And I get it, it's all part of the genre, but it shouldn't draw so much attention to itself. It shouldn't feel so cringeworthy every time I read it. And I think it's significant that Childs had come off a career writing for television. This read sort of like a 90s procedural, a bit of Knight Rider meets Law and Order. The thing is, this type of story works with a bit of updating for TV. The curse of it is that it's been renewed for a second season, which is great, but it all falls on Alan Ritchson as Jack Reacher's shoulders. Any affection that we have for the secondary characters like Conklin or Finley disappears as Reacher moves into a new town to uncover a new mystery and a new host of secondary characters. Either way, I'm excited for that second season and excited to see if they return to Southern Ontario to shoot it. Port Perry, Kingston Penitentiary, as well as down the road in Cambridge, all standing in for Georgia in the first season. Anyway, the series, great. The book, not so much. But I do feel, like romance, I need to read more of these dad books. The Pattersons, the Baldaccis, the Thoreaus. I mean, sort of nice diversionary reads, when done well, can just pass the time very easily. Well, that's it for me this week. Who knows when the next video will drop. In the meantime, I'm reading over on the Discord, My Father's Notebook, translated from the Dutch. Over at work, we're reading Taylor Jenkins Reid's Malibu Rising. Both are fantastic so far. Really enjoying them. But I'm grateful that I haven't fallen into a reading slump considering how long the winter is feeling yet again this year. Hopefully it isn't affecting you all that much and we're just emerging out into the lengthening days. Either way, I hope you have a great week of reading and we'll talk to you again soon.